You're here because you want to get smart fast on stuff that matters.
Right.
Without feeling totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what we do.
We take those sources you're interested in.
Pull out the good stuff just for you.
The need-to-know stuff.
Today, we're diving into Start, Stay, or Leave
The Art of Decision-Making.
by Trey Gowdy.
Now, Gowdy?
He's not a psychologist,
No.
not some career guru or anything.
Right, not some, self-help.
He's a former federal prosecutor and congressman.
And he's looking back on...
All the choices he's made.
Yeah, the big ones and the small ones.
And how he decided,
Do I jump in?
do I stay put?
Do I get out of here?
So it's a personal take on decision-making.
And I think what's so interesting is where these insights are coming from.
Yeah.
Because it's not just some theory. It's from someone who's been in these crazy high-stakes situations.
The courtroom politics.
Where every decision really matters.
A real consequence.
Match consequences.
So yeah, the book boils down to those 3 questions.
Should I start?
Should I stay?
Should I go?
I'm sure you've asked yourself these questions.
Oh, all the time.
And Gowdy uses these questions as a framework.
For tackling all kinds of decisions we face.
It's a whole new way to look at choices.
And to really understand the weight of his examples.
Yeah.
It helps to know a bit about Gowdy's background.
Okay.
So he was a federal prosecutor in upstate South Carolina.
Interesting.
And, this isn't a region known for a ton of federal murder cases.
Oh, wow.
There was only one in the 25 years before Gowdy arrived.
Really?
But his time there, it was marked by some pivotal cases
I bet.
that really shaped his thinking about decisions and their impact.
You can see how that would happen.
Absolutely.
And early on, he talks about this really powerful case.
Yeah.
The case of Ricky Samuel.
Oh, this one's intense.
Ricky was a witness in a drug case Gowdy was prosecuting.
And he was facing this really tough decision.
Yeah.
Cooperate with the government.
Or face serious prison time.
And you have to remember the pressure here was immense.
Oh, yeah.
Gowdy really breaks down how the federal drug system works.
Right.
And the mandatory minimum sentences are harsh, even for relatively small amounts of drugs.
Wow.
For Ricky, possessing just an ounce of crack cocaine,
Yeah.
they carried a minimum sentence of 5 years.
Years.
No parole.
So that really highlights what he was up against.
Absolutely a huge decision.
So what did he decide?
Ricky decided to cooperate.
Okay.
He agreed to help in an investigation
Okay.
of a bigger drug operation
Bigger how?
run by a dealer named Tommy Pagelin.
Tommy Pablin. Okay.
And this led to a controlled buy bust.
Classic.
Ricky, undercover, bought cocaine from Pablin.
Uh-huh.
They arrested Pablin with the marked money.
Gotcha. Seems pretty straightforward.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is where it gets dark.
Oh, no.
So there's this thing called the discovery process.
Okay.
The prosecution has to share its evidence with the defense.
Right.
And despite precautions to protect witnesses,
Of course.
Ricky's identity was exposed.
No way.
And Pablin found out Ricky was the informant.
This does not sound good.
It wasn't.
Uh-oh.
Pablin, he decided to have Ricky killed
Oh, my gosh.
to silence him.
Wow.
He hired a hitman
A hitman, really?
from out of state, Bob Harry Fowler.
Okay.
And get this, Fowler pretended to be a street preacher to gain Ricky's trust.
That's so messed up.
Over weeks, he befriended Ricky.
Oh, gosh.
And then, under the guise of taking him to be baptized,
Oh, no.
he lured Ricky to a pond
Awful.
and murdered him.
This is just heartbreaking.
It really shows the dangers these cooperating witnesses face
Yeah.
and the immense responsibility prosecutors have to protect them.
Absolutely.
Gowdy's initial reaction was just gut-wrenching.
I can imagine.
He felt responsible for Ricky's safety.
Of course.
And this had happened despite those assurances.
It's a terrible tragedy.
It is.
What did they do?
Well, Gowdy and his colleague, they decided to continue the drug case.
Even without their key witness.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing.
And this is where this key decision-making principle comes in.
Okay.
The idea of starting at the end.
Starting at the end. I like that.
So they had this huge obstacle, right?
Yeah. Losing their witness.
They had to think differently.
Okay.
Their end goal was Pablin's conviction.
Got it.
And they worked backward from there.
So how did they do that?
They literally started by writing the closing argument,
Oh, wow. Interesting.
the one they wanted to deliver,
Uh-huh.
and then they structured the whole case to support that argument.
That's a really cool strategy.
It is, and incredibly, they got Pablin convicted on the drug charges.
Even without Ricky's testimony.
Yeah,
Wow.
and later, He was also found guilty in the murder for hire.
So justice was served.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
And that experience solidified this idea of starting at the end.
A strategy that goes way beyond the courtroom.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners, what does this mean for them?
So this start at the end framework,
Yeah.
it's not just a legal thing.
Right.
It's a way to approach any big decision.
Oh, I like that.
You visualize your desired outcome,
Okay.
and then you map out the steps.
To get there.
Exactly. It helps you focus on what's important.
That's smart.
Gowdy tells this story about a young man who came to him.
While he was in Congress.
Yeah, the guy was fixated on getting into a specific military academy
Okay.
because he thought it was the only way to eventually get into Congress.
Ambitious.
Gowdy told him to focus on the end goal, being in Congress,
Right.
not just one path.
Don't get hung up on the hunt.
Exactly.
Love that.
And he also talks about incorporating dreams and aspirations into this vision.
Yeah.
Logic is important, but don't dismiss those big goals.
Even if they seem far off.
Right. They can be huge motivators.
For sure.
So it makes you wonder, what does your desired final scene look like?
That's a good question.
Not in a morbid way, but what do you want to have accomplished?
How do you want to be remembered?
Gowdy says he wants to be remembered as funny and fair.
By those who knew him best.
It's not about titles or recognition for him.
Yeah, it's about character.
It really is.
So yeah, are your decisions lining up with that final picture you see?
That's the question.
Gowdy also talks about this traditional pyramid model of success.
The one that's all about external validation.
Achievements.
Right, climbing the ladder.
He says early in his career, he was always trying to stand out.
Like, how can I be different?
Yeah.
He wanted to be like Judge Donald S. Russell,
Who's that?
this judge with super impressive credentials.
Ah, I see.
Gowdy was constantly asking himself what he had achieved.
Yeah, measuring himself against others.
Exactly.
But then what?
Well, he realized this whole model was faulty.
Faulty how?
It made him chase titles and accolades.
Instead of finding his own purpose.
Right. And he even admits that his education block in the pyramid
Yeah.
felt thin and flimsy.
He was afraid of failing.
I think we've all felt that.
Oh, yeah.
And he argues that if you're always trying to prove your uniqueness,
By achieving things.
you miss the value of just being you.
Accepting yourself.
Yeah. He uses the example of his friends with political ambitions
Okay.
and how not reaching the top doesn't equal failure.
That's a good point.
It's about shifting from external accomplishments
To internal character.
Yeah, Gowdy credits this change to his father,
And his wife, Terry.
who accepted him unconditionally.
That's beautiful.
He realized it's so freeing to be valued for who you are.
Not what you achieve.
Like his decision not to run for Speaker of the House.
Oh, interesting.
He looked in the mirror
Yeah.
and realized that role didn't fit who he wanted to be.
So it makes you think, when you look at yourself, do you like what you see?
Are you defining success on your own terms?
That's a good one.
Gowdy also has this really practical decision-making tool,
Okay, I like practice.
analyzing the worst-case scenario.
Interesting.
He tells this funny story about asking Terry Dillard to pack his lunch.
Back in high school.
Yeah, for a choir trip.
Cute.
And he thought, what's the worst that could happen?
She says no.
Exactly. Not a big deal.
Right.
So he breaks it down. Map out the bad outcomes.
Okay.
Assign probabilities.
Uh-huh.
Imagine the absolute worst.
Okay.
And then make a plan to deal with it.
So you're prepared.
Yeah, by being prepared for the downsides.
Yeah.
You're less afraid to take risks.
I see. It's like a safety net.
It is. And Gowdy says it actually makes him more risk averse.
Really?
Because he's already thought through the bad stuff.
That's interesting.
He also says, don't go through life saying what you wished you had done.
That's good advice.
And what are you afraid of?
Face your fears.
Exactly.
But the book isn't just about starting or leaving.
No.
Gowdy also talks about the importance of staying.
Sticking with things.
Even when they're not what you expected?
He calls them Sunday afternoon drivers.
Okay.
People who get too comfortable and stop trying to improve.
Complacent.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid that?
By realizing that staying can be moving forward.
Okay.
You build skills, relationships, reputation.
It's about commitment.
He tells his great story about taking a ballet class in college.
Ballet.
Yeah, he felt totally out of place.
I bet.
But he stayed
Good for him.
and learned so much about commitment and pushing himself.
That's awesome.
So it's about developing endurance
Sticking with it.
and not always switching paths.
So you can really get good at something.
Yeah, Gowdy talks about hiring people
In the solicitor's office.
and Congress
Okay.
and how they valued consistency.
Makes sense.
He told Sharia Clark to look at the film of her career.
Yo!
Not just one potentially damaging opportunity.
So long-term thinking.
Exactly. Prioritize reputation and values.
Over short-term gains.
He also says staying can lead to unexpected opportunities.
Oh, like what?
His scheduler, Mary Langston Willis Dawn,
Okay.
she found her passion by staying in her hometown
Wow, that's cool.
and working with her old boss.
It's like things came full circle. Gowdy also talks about these Nathans.
Those trusted advisors,
The people who give you honest advice.
even when it's tough to hear.
He uses the story of King David and the prophet Nathan
From the Bible.
to show how important it is to seek out wise counsel.
And actually listen to it.
Yeah, even when it's not what you want to hear.
So it's about creating an environment where people feel safe.
To be honest with you,
Your Nathans tell you what you need to hear.
not just what you want to hear.
He says don't assume everyone is on your side.
Ouch.
He even talks about a warning from his 8th grade Sunday school teacher
About what?
about not everyone wanting you to succeed.
That's a tough lesson.
It is.
So you have to be able to tell the difference.
Between real advice
Yeah.
and negative projections.
People who maybe don't have your best interests at heart.
He tells this story about Elijah Cummings
Okay.
and his guidance counselor, who discouraged him from being a lawyer,
Really?
but Cummings didn't let that stop him
Good for him.
because what other people think of you.
It's not your business.
You do you.
Exactly.
So find your Nathans
A small group you trust.
who will tell you the truth.
Always.
And then there are those times when the answer is leave.
Sometimes you have to walk away.
Gowdy talks about being a violent crime prosecutor
Tough job.
and how it's seeing so much tragedy,
Yeah.
it started to conflict with his beliefs.
His faith.
He quotes Solon.
Who said something about indignation towards injustice,
Okay.
which drew Gowdy to that work.
But it became too much
It's important to recognize when the sacrifices outweigh the gains
when it's impacting your well-being.
and your relationships.
Gowdy decided to leave his job to run for Congress.
A big decision.
And he talks about the tough timing.
Because there were a bunch of murders in his district right after.
Oh.
But he knew he needed to leave.
It was time.
So sometimes you have to leave an environment
Yeah.
to grow.
Because as Gowdy says,
Environments shape us.
it's a powerful thought.
It is.
Finally, Gowdy talks about being selectively selfish, making decisions based on your values,
Your own well-being.
not what others expect of you.
He tells stories about Tim Scott
His son Watson,
and his daughter Abigail.
all making their own choices.
Not following someone else's definition of success.
He compares life to a sentence,
Okay.
emphasizing the impact of our decisions,
And it's a journey.
learning to manage fear.
And knowing the difference between titles, jobs, dreams, and reality.
He almost dropped out of his first political race
Really?
because he was afraid to fail in his hometown.
That's relatable.
But his mom encouraged him to run for student council years before.
Interesting contrast.
It shows how our values can surprise us.
Sometimes.
He also mentions Dietrich Bonhoeffer,
Okay.
who said, "The end is a beginning of life."
I like that.
And Stephen Pressfield,
Okay.
who talks about conquering your own definition of failure,
Because true failure is inaction.
letting fear control you.
Powerful stuff.
And it leads to a final thought for you.
Okay.
Gowdy says we need to conquer our own definition of success.
To really live our best lives.
And that means facing our own definition of failure.
That's a challenge.
It is.
So in Gowdy's start, stay, or leave,
Decision-making is an art.
it's personal.
It evolves.
It requires self-reflection,
A clear vision,
knowing your value,
managing risk,
seeking advice.
and knowing when to start, stay, or leave.
It's all connected.
And remember, this was for you.
Yeah, we hope it helps you navigate your own life.
And make your own decisions.
Think about those questions.
What's your ideal final picture?
What do you see in the mirror?
Who are your Nathans?
What are your worst-case scenarios?
And how can you prepare for them?
And remember Bonhoeffer's words.
The end is a beginning of life.
Your decision-making journey is unique.
Embrace it.
Learn from your choices.
And keep exploring what matters.
As you write your own story.
It's your life to live.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
See you next time.